Hello, my name is Kunal. I'm studying in Education University of Hong Kong. I'm doing Bachelor's of Education in Mathematics Primary, going to year 3. Frankly, it wasn't my first choice. I wanted to actually be an architect, so my first option was Bachelor of Architecture in HKU. But then, due to my scores, I had to put a course which was safer and also which was still related to me as a person and what I liked. So, um, well, at that time, IED was my second option for Bachelor of Education for Mathematics. Yeah. Everything was practically in English initially from the get go. Even though if it was a course which was taught in Chinese, they would still be in English first, and then at the end they would say in Cantonese or in Chinese of medium of instruction. So once I got the offer, or when I had my three choices put up and had to go for the interview in this university first, um, initially it did say in Cantonese. The interview was going to be in Cantonese because at that time it was more of a 60% English and then 40% taught in Chinese for my course. But um, I had a friend who still basically insisted that I go. So I did go for the interview. And the teachers did see, or the professors saw me and they're like, okay, can you speak Cantonese? I'm like, well, if it can be in English, it would be much better. So then what they did was they were able to arrange a one on well, two professors meeting interview rather than a group interview because everyone else went through a group interview. So that was the only exception, or I was the only exception at that interview place. Yeah. If we were to talk about trying to convince or try to attract more non-Chinese to actually come in to this university or this course particularly to well, this course particularly, it would be better if they could have English and Chinese if that's necessary. But given the fact that they're trying to make all the courses into English, or at least most of the courses more into English than Chinese, I think it would be better if they could have interviews in English, and that way they can still sort of they could have supplement Cantonese if that's necessary. But otherwise, if the majority is still Chinese, maybe one or two interviews specifically for non-Chinese would still be pretty helpful because the ratio is still pretty big in terms of non-Chinese to Chinese. So just to be fair to both sides. Yeah. Yeah, definitely, because I'm actually the first person in my family to go into university, so that's a very big deal, and it's kind of ironic because all my other cousins, at least in my father's side's family, they always had an issue with like their money or some other kind of temporary issues at that period of time, which stopped them from going to university. So I have an elder brother who is 12 years older than me, and he's been probably one of the most active supporters in terms of money, in terms of keeping me motivated to actually go. And obviously, my mom is always there to make sure that I have the right track of mind and don't let go of my drive to go into university. So I had them as my right and left hands to go forward, and overall, friends were a good support anyway because even they had the same dream to go into a university because it was necessary. And if you were to be left behind in a HD or an AD, it is way more risky because of how the economy is going now. Yeah. So overall, I had tons of support. Yeah. I do have a plan. What I plan to do is after I graduate, probably I'll maybe work for 2 to 3 years first, save up a good amount of money first, and then try and go for a master's degree. Now the thing is, I'm not sure whether I'm going to go for a master's in education or I might just still try to go for master's in architecture if that is possible or something related to that. The only thing is um, whether it's gonna fit in with my schedule because I'll still be working, or I'm still wondering whether I'll do part time or full time. Other than that, if teaching does not completely work out for me, I'll probably still try and go into either architecture or maybe even just business. It is always a safer option. Yeah. I think so far in terms of support and assistance, it's been very active as well. Um, I think overall every student does get the right kind of support from the professors. It's just that maybe the students don't take the chance to actually get the support. That's one, or they're practically just lazy to actually do their work to get the support. But overall, I think our professors are pretty well, how do you say, well educated, well organized in terms of helping students, in terms of their own knowledge to actually help the students. So I haven't had any problems with any of the professors. I think all my courses have been going pretty smoothly as well. Yeah. I think there was this one course that I took last year, which had a part where basically it's history of mathematics. That's the overall course title. Um, the thing is, there is a very big part where they spoke about Chinese mathematics, and a lot of the Chinese math was derived from their own idioms or their own kind of I can't say dialect, but it's basically Chinese literacy from years and years back, maybe like hundreds of years ago. So it was really difficult for the professor to try and translate it into English. However, that professor specifically also made sure that I understood. So he had a one-on-one meeting session with me to try and make sure that I actually understand everything. And also the good thing about that particular course was I didn't have to do my project on that topic. I could still choose other topics. So it wasn't that if I couldn't understand that I would suffer. Um, Otherwise, in terms of language, I think we can still do both in English and Chinese, but I think we might discuss this in a bit. But if we want more non-Chinese to actually be motivated to try and learn, or try and teach in sorry, try and learn to be teachers from this university, it would be best if it's more accessible in terms of like through English. Yep. Well, I haven't had any formal teaching practice just yet. I'm just in year three, so I'll be having the first section next year in semester one. So that would be my formal teaching. But I am still sort of doing tutoring, but the thing is, I'm tutoring my friend's either younger sibling or my friend's suggested friend. So they're all practically all non-Chinese. So that's the fortunate part. So I was able to reach out. If you ask me whether how would I be able to tutor Chinese students if that was the case, or whether it's needed, I honestly think most of the Chinese students are well off themselves. They don't need like outside help overall. So I think the only people that actually need help might just be the non-Chinese, because either they have a harder time understanding or they have their own issues in terms of motivation. So, well, that's what I try and establish when I'm going for my tutoring sessions, that they don't fail to see the point of what they're learning, and they actually stay motivated to continuously learn. Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say having cultural equipment or cultural how do you say, artifacts or things like that, I don't think it's that necessary. That's my own personal view. Some may think that they want to feel more at home, so they would probably want that. But again, I don't think it's that necessary. I think what is really necessary is what they need to use on a daily basis, which is food. They need food, and I know that there's a upgrade in the canteen, but there isn't an upgrade in terms of people who actually need particular or specific dietary, or who have specific dietary needs. For example, there are a bunch of Hindus that are vegetarian, or even Buddhists that are vegetarian. I don't know what's the percentage of Hindus or Buddhists in Chinese, but if you talk about non-Chinese, it is very high. And then there are Muslims who need to have halal food, and halal is basically where you can get is, I'm not sure if you've heard of Ebenezer's, or there are other Turkish restaurants that have such halal food. So I think these are the two main things that is very necessary for our school to sort of bring out, because if I remember correctly, HKU, UST, PolyU, whatever, CityU, these are probably the four more popular universities, and all these four universities have a halal-based restaurant. It's either they have more money or they're better sponsored because they're more popular or bigger than EduHK for now. But I'm hoping that there's another way to have another restaurant or at least some caterer that can provide these two things very easily because they can come hand in hand. Yeah. But other than that, I think it's quite okay. Yeah. I think I have one of the most integration with the local students, and I would say that's probably because I don't mind mingling with Chinese. I prefer mingling with locals as well because it's necessary when you're growing up as well. Because if you were to stick to your own little community, you need to understand that in Hong Kong, if you're going to stay here, it is a 5 to 10% community. So if you want to actually expand yourself, you must go into the majority, at least to sort of better secure yourself in terms of finding a job or even practicing your own language or practicing the language that everyone else speaks. So I think I do my best to mingle with locals. I do have like a local Chinese friend group, and then I have my own non-Chinese group as well. So I personally think I have a good balance. So I would say social life in this university is completely good. Yeah. The cultural background of non-Chinese is quite different, and they might see things differently because a lot of them grew up in a more what's the word? In a more hard labor sort of environment, basically to work more than actually educate themselves. So that's where you see a pretty big difference. However, I think one thing is either the kids themselves need to try and help their parents understand that education is becoming more and more important for development at this time of life or this time of age. Having the parents more aware of what's happening or how things have changed, or at least how it's different to their country in Hong Kong, because Hong Kong is more active in terms of development, in terms of education, in terms of tertiary or the tertiary industry, which is helping Hong Kong go forward. I think helping parents understand this difference might be more difficult, but it's also having the students or the non-Chinese students being motivated to actually take their own initiative to learn and to educate themselves and to actually have a drive to go into universities. So how can universities develop that? I may not have such a clear answer right now, but overall I think what universities can do is to show that we're more accommodative, that we want as many people as possible, regardless of your race, regardless of your religion whatsoever, that education is its own religion. Let's say it's its own faith, because I think everyone needs education, and education is much more important at this age than ever before. Yeah. I think overall, they may not exactly see the big picture just yet. They might just see, oh, this is a guy helping me out. The only thing they would see differently is that, oh, it's a person who is similar to me that is helping me out. It's not just another Chinese friend, or it's not just another teacher who is Chinese, or someone that's very different to them helping them become or progress. So one thing that I found that is really important for most of our non-Chinese students is that comfort with the one that's teaching them. It's understood that most of the teachers are going to be Chinese, which is fine, which is normal. But when there's a non-Chinese teacher, they automatically feel, okay, well, I think I can connect with this person. So they actually normally would want to try and pay attention more and more compared to the other teachers, because it's different. It's not usual. So I think there's the X factor that it's a non-Chinese teacher, and I might just be more interested, or his way of teaching might just be more interesting, so I'd actually want to try and pay attention. And as they pay more attention, and as they get maybe even closer to the teacher in person, or in terms of, let's say, as just from person to person, they will start to realize that his choices that he has made, or that she has made, is actually worthwhile, and I could do the same thing. So role model, I think, is very important and very true that a lot of non-Chinese need to find or maybe have. But again, at the end of the day, regardless of whatever I've just said, it always comes down to your own self-motivation and drive. Yeah. One thing that I found very irritating is the way the education system is. It's rigid. So the education system can be rigid, that's fine. But if if there's any way that the universities can sort of drift away from that just a little bit, and not just have the education as the means to actually go into university, that would be more accessible to a lot of other people as well, not just non-Chinese, but also the Chinese. Because you have a lot of students who may not excel in education, but can probably get a good enough score or good enough grade to get into university, but because they're not competitive enough in terms of academics compared to other students, that's why they fail to get into university. But maybe with their sports abilities, or maybe with their fine arts abilities, or some other kinds of, in Hong Kong, I would say the unusual ability, or the unusual talent to actually learn, or to further progress, because you don't just have businesses or just schools or just buildings to build. You have people to cook, you have people to do sports, to represent a country. And a lot of times these people don't get noticed because they don't have the right channels, they don't have the right contacts. And at least if the university is willing to help such students to create the contact, to create the means to expand their name, I think more people can be more successful through Hong Kong.